Hi everybody, this is the last of the series of webinars today. We've been running a series of webinars focusing on getting people, getting tourism businesses safely back to work. The series of webinars, it supports the publication of the Department for the Economy and Tourism Northern Ireland guidance, which was published on the 23rd of June, entitled Working Safely During the COVID-19 in the Visitor Economy Sector. So that's the general guidance, and it is supported by two complementary sets of guidance, which we'll talk about in the webinar today. We ran a webinar on the general guidance last Friday. It was aired last Friday. It's also available to view at your leisure on the Tourism Northern Ireland Business Support COVID website, and that clarifies some of the general guidance, so I would refer you to that. The webinar that we ran over this week has included important elements such as your risk assessment. We had environmental health people walking us through the relevant categories of risk assessment. And if this is something that you're keen to see a bit more detail, again, check that out on the Tourism Northern Ireland website. All the webinars have been supported and designed as part of the Tourism Enterprise Development Programme, otherwise known as TED. So my name is Sharon Scott. I'm a Tourism Northern Ireland mentor, and I'm going to facilitate the session today. I specialise in working with small businesses across Northern Ireland, small tourism businesses, and particularly around the area of clustering and experience development. So I'm going to take you through the session today, and I'll also host and facilitate a question and answer session at the end of the session. So today I'm joined by Colin Neill, the Chief Executive of Hospitality Ulster, who everybody will know because he never seems to be off our tellies at the minute, and that's all good. He has been the voice going through this whole process through the last 14 weeks of the pandemic. So we're going to run this webinar very different from any of the others that you may have been tuning into during the week. We're going to run it just as Colin, as many of you will know, if you're part of Hospitality Ulster, often runs the whole idea of the Coffee with Colin. So that's something that we're really keen to go with today. It's going to be a more informal question and answer session between Colin and myself, and we're hopefully going to tap into some of the key questions that you may have as you embark on the reopening today. So do feel free to use the chat function. It's at the bottom of your screens in your Zoom functions. You can input questions as we go along. If something pops up that you want some more details on, please do use that. We'll pick up on those, and we'll pick up on those at the end of the session. So do use that. It's an interactive way. Some of the webinars that we've been doing over the last week have been upwards of 100 people. This one today is slightly smaller, but it's just a way of collating and getting as much information to you in the short time that we have together. So thank you, Colin, for joining us today, and what must be a pretty hectic time with opening looming tomorrow for some businesses, and again for some others in the weeks ahead. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I mean, I'll maybe sort of take a walk through of just who, what, where, and when can open tomorrow. And look, thanks for the big intro. As people will have noticed, I have a face for radio, so hopefully my TV appearances will diminish somewhat as we get back to some sort of normal, or a new normal, as people say. Like, I'll maybe run through, and I mean, this is very much an informal session. I'm not a highly trained professional in any sense of the matter, so I'll chat you through the bits and pieces, and then as your questions arrive, I can clarify some. Say, Hospitality Ulster, membership body, membership across pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels, visitor attractions, and indeed the airports. Our focus is food and beverage, so I know Janice from the Hotel Federation covered accommodation and stuff this morning, so I'll not go into that at all. As from tomorrow, I suppose the simple term is that when it comes to licensed premises, hotel, restaurants and pubs can open indoors as restaurants, as licensed restaurants. If for the sale of alcohol only, that can only be done in a licensed area outdoors. For unlicensed premises like coffee shops, etc., sort of cafes, they can operate a normal business but themselves and everyone is subject to social distancing. And remember, there's an awful lot of confusion out there. Social distancing in Northern Ireland is 2 meters, but can be reduced to 1 meter minimum where there are mitigations in place. That doesn't mean just everybody stands beside each other at 1 meter. There has to be mitigations to bring the actual element down. But please don't get confused with the time limit that's down south, the taking of names that's in England. That doesn't apply. In our world, if I concentrate, say, on the licensed premises, the unlicensed is pretty straightforward. Social distancing is the only rule they have. On licensed premises, I say hotels, licensed restaurants, and bars that serve food, pubs that serve food, can serve alcohol indoors, but it must be it's defined legally as a main table meal. And that is, the legal definition of that is actually under the licensed restaurants legislation, which is at least a main course and must be consumed seated at a table or surface that isn't designed for serving. So it wouldn't be as sit at the bar and eat your meal. In that sense, I know people will go, well, what is a main table meal? It's definitely not sandwiches, finger food, or a bag of nuts or a bag of crisps. And I appreciate there will be people trying to see how they work around that. I would say in all of this stuff, what we have to remember is the virus hasn't gone away. These are measures to protect the health and safety of our staff and our customers. So it's not about the minimum you can do, it's doing the right thing and doing the most you can do. When it comes to outdoor, you can sell alcohol only, as they say. That doesn't mean you can't have food, it just means you don't have to have food outdoors. And that's where non-food pubs can trade at the minute. And I say, I get it if you're a non-food pub in this chat room. I really do understand your frustration. I have been on the phone since something like 6 this morning talking about it again with our politicians. We are making slow headway, but I get the frustration and the desperation to get open and earning some money. We haven't forgot about yous, and we're not going to let the government forget about yous either. But as it stands from tomorrow, you can only trade outdoors, and I can cover off about licensed areas and stuff later. Key element is that it must all be table service. That does not mean a waiter has to bring you to a table. It means it must be consumed sitting. Whether it's alcohol or whether it's food, you must be seated to consume it. You cannot have anyone standing or indeed getting served over the bar. You can get served at a service point because your risk assessment will decide whether it's safer for your server, waiter, waitress, whatever the proper term is nowadays, to go to a table. You know, they could go to a table and be exposed to 4 or 6 people, or are they better somewhere behind a perspex screen, a bit like you see in the Spar or Vivo where you go to it and you get served under that. Table service is very much about no one standing. It's a seated audience. And that's in there because it's about encouraging people. You don't want people moving around, getting close to other people, getting relaxed and social distancing being forgotten about. So table service is key. Other bits in there are government guidelines say there should be no bands or live sports screened. And look, a lot of this is guidance because primary legislation takes a long way. My advice would be, if it says it's government guidance, take it as something that you should do because it's there for a reason. If you look at bans, part of that is that people singing, moisture droplets from their mouth travel a much greater distance. It's why churches have been closed and only been open with no singing. It's also about volume. When customers and staff have to speak over that volume, then they increase the distance that they spread moisture particles from their mouth as well. I mean, singing, I'm told, can be in between 5 to 10 meters. So if you were having, say, you know, it says no bands, you know, interpretation of that could be, okay, well, I'm going to have a soloist, but you would have to risk assess that entertainment. And most likely they would have to sing from behind a screen. and at a volume that does not require anyone to raise their voice to speak. It's really, that's what those are there for. It's not about someone up there just didn't like the fact they don't like bands and they don't watch football. The same with live sports is about encouraging social distance, encouraging people not to shout loudly or jump up and hug each other if Liverpool score a goal or something like that. So it's all built in around that element of it. But there are no time restrictions on customers. There is no keeping a list of customers, and indeed they have not reduced the opening hours for licensed premises at this point. And I say at this point because all of this can change as we develop through this. So it really is important that really every action in every area in your premises is risk assessed, and then you look at physical, technological or behavioural solutions to mitigate the spread of the virus. And that's how you can reduce from 2 meters to 1 meter. It's not a case of, oh, then it's just 1 meter between everybody. And the great debate is, oh, is it 1 meter, from the table? Is it 1 meter from the fork? It's between people. That's what social distancing is about. I'll maybe stop there and try and let you sort of pose a few questions or
you've given us a very good introductory piece of just who and what, and you've clarified actually there's been a lot of maybe confusion today about the whole idea of outdoor and what can and can't be sold and operate outdoors. So that's a good overview of that and some of the questions that are coming in today. I'll pick up now on the whole idea of the risk assessment, which you've mentioned. And we've had a discussion in some of the webinars today already about risk assessment is seen as that daunting piece of work. It's been a challenge. It has been something that's been on everybody's minds through the last couple of weeks. But as we approach now the reopening dates tomorrow and the weeks ahead, what we're seeing is that risk assessment is really, particularly for small business, that it gives them that element of control. As we go through this, what is to be a very nervous period, how will I cope? How many people will come? How will I manage them? What I do? And that's really what your risk assessment will allow you to do. It will give you the control over your business, and if you decide you're operating at 50% capacity, if you can show your distancing, if you're working with your staff, very much part of the risk assessment. It's not the standing document. It's something that, again, check it on Monday morning after your first weekend, what worked, what didn't, what your staff thought worked, and this is going to be an evolving process. Every webinar that we've talked has really focused on that risk assessment, and Colin, you're certainly no different, and you've given lots of help and support to your members about how to go about that task. Give us some overview of the documents that you're producing at the minute.
Yes, look, we have a range of documents. We're part, UK Wade, our sister organisation, UK Hospitality, has actually led the development up of pretty much all of the industry guidance, every sector, right from caravan parks right through to food and beverage as well. I also sit on the BES department in England's task force for pubs and restaurants. So there's been a lot of input there. Sometimes you look at these documents and you think these are daunting. They are huge, and but if you look at our guidance, there is actually each one's done in a complete section. It's a bit like a library. You go and say, I am a restaurant, and you can pull out your pages and ignore the rest from it. And obviously it all fits in with the overarching government guidance. Risk assessment in the simplest form is really, if you put yourself in either the customer journey, the staff member's journey, every moving element, and you just walk through it and think on the approach of, you've got to stop contamination from physical touch, and you've got to stop contamination from people's breath. And that's really looking at everything through that approach. We also work, we have a hospitality response group, which we established actually before we were closed. We have a senior EHO on that. We have the health and safety executive on and stuff. And out of that, we have developed up a range of template standing operating procedures as well. And those are actually quite good, even from, if you read those, and they're all downloadable from our website, it allows you actually, it informs your risk assessment as well, because it was developed up. We had the University of Ulster Hospitality School work on developing those up. We have a template risk assessment, and we've all an example of one that's already filled in to help you along. And indeed, we have a video from our risk assessment specialist just talking through the ethos of those. I mean, the real bits to watch for are, if you think about your customer journey coming in, what are they when they arrive, how are they being looked after, where they're being directed, and then, all of the bits and pieces that they will either touch or interact with. And then think about that from back of house with all your staff. How will they interact? How will they actually process stuff? And what's your procedure for making sure before and after any contact, everything's sanitized and that people aren't breathing in each other?
Okay, that's brilliant. And if we sort of walk through the customer journey, if you like now, and I know we've heard a lot about the pinch points, the key, the areas where it is more difficult to operate within the social distancing guidelines. So if we start with that, actually getting into the pub or restaurant, and some advice around that, the entry points and the doorways in, what are you recommending?
I mean, ideally, there's a entrance door and exit door. So people, the flow of consumer, they're not meeting each other as they come in and out. Now, that's not always possible. And then it's trying to mitigate for that. But if you have a door facing the street, but your fire exit is to the side and it's accessible back into the public domain, there's a great way to just have an exit point. What we're saying is that if you can't do that, then how do you make sure that people aren't bumping into each other at the door? And again, it's simply risk assessing, having processes. We are suggesting that really when a consumer arrives, your customer arrives, they should be briefed on what's going to happen in the premise, because there are methods when you book a table for a restaurant, if you have a booking system, you can send them the information. Nobody reads it. Let's be honest. When was the last time you read what was printed on your ticket to go to something? You just know you've got a ticket to ride. So ideal is that when they arrive, you are running fully seated here. So that in itself, the social distancing requirements in your premises will dictate your capacity. And that's exactly what has come out of government here. And it's one of the reasons we didn't want them setting hard rules about numbers, because not every premise will be able to operate within those numbers. It's really taking your social distancing, working out your capacity, rearrange your furniture, and that'll soon teach you how many you can have in the place. So when people arrive, a wee sign to say, please wait here to be seated, speak to them, brief them on your procedures of you will be taken to our table, and customer reassurance can be played in here too. The table has been sanitized for your arrival, so you're reassuring them you've taken those measures. Point out to them that you will do all you can to ensure social distancing, but your customer has a responsibility as well to ensure social distancing, and remind them of that. It's then about show them to their table, and the table really should have nothing on it. They should arrive at the table sanitized, because if you've got salt and vinegars on that, how are you sanitizing those between each customer? Some restaurants are going to run, I know, with disposable, almost like paper table mats with a menu on them, so they're thrown away every time, because those will be the sort of things that people are touching regularly and you want to avoid. It will be very much a case too of what's your process for going to the toilets, and brief them again on that. I know it sounds a bit strange. It's almost like putting your hand up to go to school, but if people aren't explained, they won't know. So it really is talking to people and answering their questions. And I think that will reassure your customers as well that you have taken the measures that are really there. Say when it comes to toilets, I have seen all sorts of procedures. Some are just about signage because they're not that big, saying, please wait here till the toilet becomes free. And there's almost like it's almost like the open all hours thing. There's a wee open and closed flippable card. Others have really fancy cameras that have a traffic light system now work to stop you going to the toilet if there's anybody in it. It will be about remember your toilets. It's risk assessing to say how many can be in there in social distance. Between cubicles there are physical separations. So if you risk assess that, it's pretty much there's a wall there, so you don't need separation. But between urinals, they might be too close. If you have 3, you might want to, cordon off one. And again, with sinks and stuff, is there enough space to people to social distance, to wash their hands? It would be good practice also on the toilets to have hand sanitizers on the way in and on the way out, because one, we hope people are washing their hands properly, but if they haven't, they've touched door handles and stuff again. So I may be the person who washes my hands really thoroughly, but I touch the door handle coming out, and someone else that hasn't washed their hands properly has touched it. So hand sanitizing in the white, and the same at the arrival door when customers actually arrive at your premises, should be saying hand sanitizing. Hand washing is much better, but I think we have to reinforce that with hand sanitizing for the people that are a bit more laxed about that.
Yeah, and I know, Colin, there was a whole thing about in the risk assessment webinar about the difference between sanitizer and cleanser, and obviously sanitizer does away for any need for towels and paper towels, and how you actually then have to dispose of those becomes another issue. So sanitizer is worth, and if anybody is really interested in anything cleansing, do look at the risk assessment webinar. I learned so much. I never knew there was so much to learn about different cleansing materials and what worked and what didn't. And it actually was, again, very reassuring on what actually, normal household cleansing products will kill the virus. You do not have to go in with industrial size sprays and fumigate everywhere. And I think that was something that the health and safety expert was able to help people just give a bit more clarity around that. So do check that out. And it's interesting, a lot of people have asked me, do they need to have, toilet attendants on the door and extra staff? But that's not really what you're saying.
No, look, if you're, a really large, busy place, that could maybe sort of be what you decide to do. But it's really just looking at it and putting a sensible procedure in place. It's about doing all you reasonably can and being aware of those high-risk areas. And say, one of the things we produced that was developed for us by the HOs was a toilet checklist.
Yes.
And it just means, again, I know it all sounds a bit strange, but we're in a strange world. It will act, have we look at that checklist, because using that alone poses the question for you, and then you can work out your way you can mitigate for that. And mitigation is not about how you get round it. It's how you actually put something in place to ensure the safety of the people, having considered the challenge.
Yeah, and I'd certainly recommend the sort of the standard operating procedure and the checklist around toilets. I know for some of the businesses I worked with, it's very, very useful. And who would have thought 6 months ago that we would spend so much time discussing toilets and urinals, and the same in Janice's webinar beforehand. But it's such a vital thing and such an area of concern for a lot of the businesses looking towards opening. Another key area that that's come up again and again is the whole idea of the kitchen area. For many restaurants, and particularly cafes where it's very small, it's confined, how they actually help and protect their staff cope with the new guidelines. Give us some pointers and some hints and tips around this area, Colin, please.
I mean, there is lots of government guidance from the health and safety executive as well, because they're responsible. That's where you're really in the workplace part of our responsibility. Now, again, it comes down to that thing of, in an ideal world, everybody would work in their own wee sealed off cubicle, 2 meters apart and a door on it. That's not practical in most of our businesses, purely because, the kitchens by the nature of it are generally small in our industry. People work very closely. So, risk assessing in there, it is about looking about, okay, can you get 2 meters? If you can, you do it. That's the bottom line. But if you can't, then people can come down to 1 meter. But it's mitigations. Can they work side to side or back to back instead of facing each other? Because obviously that's safer. Can you put them into teams so that each shift, if you have 2 people work in the kitchen, they're in one team and they work the same shifts. So you limit any potential to spread the virus between lots of people working within teams. Again, the PPE, kitchens by nature, if there's any HOs in the rooms, they'll know. Our kitchen, the hygiene standards are already incredibly high. So there, I mean, all of our surfaces will be sanitized regularly, but it is about hand washing. And we already have that indoctrinated approach, but it's making sure that that's upped and that people are really aware of it. Hand washing is much better than gloves because you are actually washing your hands. And again, masks and stuff in a hot environment may not be practical and indeed may not be necessary. Again, the same for visors. So it is about really, check your kitchen, look at it in a practical sense, and then start to say, well, can I move how we operate round a bit? Can I mark out something on the floor to remind staff that that's their area? So very, very practical approach. And I say, really could be as simple as, okay, I'm going to get the guys to work back to back.
Okay, and that was something I think that surprised a lot of people when the general guidance came out last week, that there was no definitive recommendation on the use of PPE. As someone quite aptly put it earlier on today, to PPE or not, that is the question. And that certainly is the question for a lot of businesses as they approach the reopening in the weeks ahead. Again, you've mentioned the idea of visors, steaming up in kitchens, how they get around that, and actually working with your staff as to what they feel comfortable with is equally important. And I think that's one thing that the guidance does point to. If a staff member feels more comfortable wearing PPE, whether within as a service, waiter or waitress, or within the kitchen area, that is within your right. They're right, and you then have an obligation to provide that for them. But this is all about communication over the next few weeks, I think, and that's something that you're proposing.
John, I think it's key to that. I mean, your staff should be involved in your risk assessments.
Yeah.
Because if they're involved, one, they'll understand the procedures that come out of them, which is really important that they are trained in what to do. But it is also their health and safety you're talking about. Staff should be involved. And your risk assessment should be available for your staff to read and indeed for inspection by any of the statutory bodies. So it's not something you scribble in the back of a cigarette packet and think, well, that's it, done, and chuck it down. And it should be revisited. This is a learning process for everybody, and better ideas may come along. So it's about adjusting that to it. And I think Sean's right. With PPE is where you can do, where you can't mitigate otherwise. Then you go down to the personal protective clothing. At 2 meters, you wouldn't need it. Really close, you would. So it is what really key, as Sean says, talk to your staff, involve them. And if they feel they would like it, I think it's right and appropriate that they have it.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take, earlier on in the week, I was able to catch up with a business that's going down the line that many of you are thinking on. It's Gary Stewart from Tartine at Distillers Arms in Bushmills. So we're going to just show you a quick video and a clip and some questions that we posed to him during the week, and we'll take it up from there afterwards. We are joined today by Gary Stewart from Tartine at Distillers Arms in Bushmills. Gary is working towards an opening date of Friday the 10th of July. And Gary is a member of Hospitality Ulster and also a member of the Taste Causeway Tourism Cluster, which specialises in food and drink up on the Causeway Coast. So we're going to look at something that Gary has produced. It's a short video, just really showing his customers what they can expect when they arrive at the restaurant. Okay, Gary, that's a beautiful video with a run through of what you're planning, so that the visitor can really see what to expect. And I suppose really it's the conundrum facing every business as we move towards reopening in Northern Ireland. How you achieve those all important safety measures, but that's something that doesn't detract from that all important visitor experience and welcome that you and at Tartine have become so renowned for. So this video really goes a long way to communicate that delicate balance really, really effectively. So give me some example, and I know it's been a journey like all businesses across the province. Give me some idea of some of the other measures that you put in place as you plan to move towards reopening your premises on the 10th of July.
Well, of course, we're very much looking forward to reopening, but we have looked at a lot of the advice that's out there, particularly the Tourism NI guidelines, and we've consulted with our local EHO and had a chat with them, and they forwarded us some of the public health safety regulations to follow. So we've digested those, and we've come up with, mostly reasonable measures that we feel we can still put in place, and mitigating measures that we can carry through, but we still don't want to compromise the guests' dining experience with us, the one that they're used to whenever they come to Tartine at Distillers Arms. So we're chatting with the staff. I feel that staff training is very, very key to all of this, because when the staff really know what they're doing, then we can convey that to the customer and put them at ease, that we know how the system works, and they can arrive and be full confidence that they're having a safe, secure and alert, that we're alert and a good experience. Also, we've looked at risk assessment, which is key to a lot of the reopening. Everything from deliveries at the back door to sanitisation stations. I'm even putting in place a welcome host. A lot of our staff, particularly front of house, already have welcome host accreditation. So we have a welcome host on arrival who, can signpost you to hand washing or sanitisation, which is discreetly done as well, and then straight to your table where a manager has your reservation and can take you straight to your table where you can start to look at menus and order food and drink from there.
Okay, Gary, and I know that you're taking the whole idea of customer service really, really seriously, and you've almost become the reservation system for Tartine. You're giving that personable service, and tell us a bit more about that.
Well, of course, all the staff, most of my staff are still on furlough schemes, so I have all the calls transferred to me from the restaurant. Of course, we're not on site all of the time, but as we get closer to opening, we will be there to answer telephones. But I'm reconnecting with a lot of the customers and chatting to everybody personally, to explain we are going to be working on maybe 60% capacity. We have kind of reimagined our own service style. It's still going to be, the detail will be there, but we've larger, more spacious table arrangements. We're utilising a lounge area that we would normally have had for pre-dinner drinks and post-dinner drinks. We're using it for table dining as well. So we've added another section to give us a little bit more room throughout the restaurant. We were introducing our one-way walking system as well, which ease of entry and ease of access is what we're trying to aim for too. So the customer flow, that people don't feel while they're enjoying their experience when other customers maybe are arriving being seated, that nobody's encroaching on each other and everybody still feels very, very comfortable there. So
Brilliant. And Gary, you've heard a lot when we look at risk assessments, there's talk about the pinch point, where's the areas where it's difficult to maintain the 1 metre social distance guidelines. Where's that in your business, and what kind of measures are you putting in place to address that?
Well, I had mentioned a welcome host. I mean, our very front door, we're an old Victorian townhouse. We have a traditional front door entry path. So we are going to have the door completely open. We're going to have a draft curtain erected, and we have a desk where the first person you meet will be our welcome host, who can direct you through the restaurant. So that's the first one we've had to look at. So we've had to, we work a lot with the booking system. So we have staggered customer arrival times, and I've emphasised, we really do need you. There's no wriggle room nowadays, whereas we used to, you're 5 minutes late after your hair, you couldn't get your hair on or something, or you're having an extra glass of Prosecco before you arrive. We need you there on time, and we can really look after you. We can do all that once we get you here, but we do need you to stick to your booking times. Another area is going through into the restaurant. We have a small snug. We're an old building where once it was cosy and warm and little small areas. We have a smaller door to walk through. So it's about the welcome host to direct you through and make sure we take people straight to their tables, and we can help them there and ensure they have their dining experience as we've planned from there. So.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
You're also offering a takeaway option to sit alongside the regular dining experience, and you've been operating that for a few weeks now over the lockdown period, and you plan to run that. Tell us a wee bit more about the rationale behind that and how that will work as well.
Well, the Tartine Gourmet is a home delivery service where we deliver, we have a Saturday evening dinner menu and a Sunday lunch menu where we deliver in the morning. We have the food cooked, prepared 98% of the way, but you receive a menu with some basic reheating instructions in the back on how to plate on your favourite plates. And we feel that has married well with people who are maybe just not so keen to go straight out and visit Tartine or any other restaurant. They can still have a restaurant experience at home. So I've been asked by so many people who have holiday homes, maybe are coming back up to, venturing back up to the Causeway Coast, who have a second home, who feel that they want to have the restaurant but have renew their familiarity with their second home, but have the dinner in there, and then maybe in a few weeks' time come to the restaurant as such. So I feel we have lost a little bit of our tour trade that we used to do during the day. So this, the gourmet delivery is another little stream of A, I can preserve jobs, and B, it's another stream of business that can marry up well with our 60% capacity of the restaurant.
Okay, that's brilliant, Gary. Thank you so much for sharing some of your journey back, and good luck with reopening on the 10th of July.
We cannot wait, and I think the customers can't wait to get back to the Causeway Coast as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so that's really from somebody that's going through the similar journey to yourselves, and I hope that gives you some pointers. Gary has been through a journey and a half over the last 14 weeks, like many of you have. So we'll pick up on again on some of the questions back to Colin. Your grilling is not over yet, Mr. Neill. So we'll keep going on. We'll talk about, you've talked to us through the entry into the premises and things around the key pitch points and areas. The service area itself, and particularly as visitors, and Gary's pointed that out already to us about moving around the restaurants, then that all important outdoor space, and we'll move then to explore how people are, extending their capacity. You've heard of Gary operating at 60%. Some people may only be able to operate it at 50 or whatever that is for your business. What kind of issues have you heard in the weeks that you up to now, that how businesses are coping with this?
I mean, obviously, I say back to social distancing will dictate your numbers. In that you've got to leave capacity for walkways and stuff as people move around as well. You can't sort of work out and think, well, everybody's at 1 meter with a screen, but I've got to squeeze by the back of everyone to get there, and for your service and stuff to be done safely. On the service element, there is no set number by government of a table size, maximum covers. Our advice is that, look, that's part of your risk assessment, and for your staff serving it, a larger party, you'll be better spreading over, 2 tables, 3 tables, so that with them socially distanced, so you can actually serve properly. Legally, you'll get into trouble if you start trying to question people if they're from the same household or the same bubble and all that. So what you have to rely on that briefing to customers that we expect them to present themselves and behave in a proper social distancing there. But, the reduced capacity then spills you into, can you use outdoor space and what for? I should clarify at the minute, there seems to be some confusion arising about a difference between hotels using outdoor space and, say, a restaurant or bar. They are all the same. Outdoor space, yes, you can have food, but it is the only place you can have alcohol on its own. And that's the real difference. You cannot go inside any licensed premises and consume alcohol without buying and consuming a main table meal. In the beer garden, in whatever area you want to call it, provided it's licensed, you can. And that's where we get into how do you go outdoors. There are, and if I look at, for unlicensed, unlicensed, pavement cafe is an option. We have worked really hard with all the councils to get them to bring forward pavement cafe legislation. Some already, like the Mid and East Antrim, have been doing it for some time. Others, like a Belfast and councils, hadn't done it at all. So that's now in place, and they're trying to speed through the application processes. And whilst I can't guarantee anything, most councils have sort of indicated they will probably treat an application as granted, and you trade at risk while they finalise the paperwork. But there will be conditions around that, leaving disabled, appropriate distance. I think it's 1.5 metres for disabled access on the footpath. You still have to apply social distancing to your tables and chairs out there. So on a footpath, you may not get a lot. If you have been involved in looking at, we talk about getting parklets, getting parking bays and stuff included, council can't grant that. You've got to talk to Department of Infrastructure and Road Service to get that given over. Your pavement cafe license then can be put over that once you've got agreement. And there are some, I know in Belfast, talk about closing certain streets at certain times to allow that to expand. In that, for a licensed premises, if you have an alcohol license and get a pavement cafe, that automatically extends your liquor license without having to go to court, provided the council don't have any proper grounds to object. The legislation is written as such, they should give you it unless they have got legitimate grounds to object. They can't just be anti-alcohol and say, we're not giving you it. In that, they can cut times on that. They can say, okay, we grant you that, but it's until 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night or whatever. I think the latest pavement cafe legislation is probably about 11 p.m. But that will vary, like if you've got residents and those type of things to consider, because you're outdoors and could disturb neighbours. Something really important to remember, if you have a piece of private ground that borders onto a footpath, you can apply for the pavement cafe license to include your private ground, and that again will automatically extend your liquor license, which is important for a lot of people. The other ways of putting a liquor license onto private ground are the straightforward way, where you go for a grant of extension. That is expensive, takes a lot of time, has to pass through the courts. So, that's a big challenge. One other option that we're exploring is occasional licenses. That's where you've often seen, if I pick on where there's a concert and they have a bar at it, that's basically where an occasional license has been transferred to that event. Pub, restaurants and hotels can apply for occasional licenses. It's not normally allowed, granted to you, just to extend your premises, adjacent to your premises. And it's not given to you, it has to be based on a not-for-profit person running an event. We have, and again, look, it's always subject to objection by police and the council, but we have been working with the courts, and I think they will look favourably on an application for occasional license, say to extend into your car park or into a bit of ground you hadn't previously licensed, provided you have a not-for-profit body as the overarching event organiser. We're organising that event for our members. So we'll be able to say to our members, yep, here is a letter to say you're part of our COVID recovery celebration type event. But then they must organise an event within that. It's a complex process, but we're guiding our guys through that as well. Doesn't guarantee you get it, because you're always open on any of those to an objection for the police or council. And one thing I would say, if you're one of our members and doing it, and you're acting irresponsibly, we will have to take it away from you, because we cannot expose the rest of the trade to, and I'm not saying anybody in here would, but take it as read. On actually then service and consumption in outdoor space, say, just call it a beer garden for ease of sake. You can buy alcohol without a meal and consume it, but again, it must be table service. It cannot be standing. And table service, both inside and out, is sitting and consuming. It's not about how you get it. How you actually get sold and collect the product will be down to individual risk assessments, because some premises it may be safer to have a hatch with a perspex screen and people come up and collect their food or their beverage. But again, that needs to be risk assessed, and you can't have a queue forming, or they need to be marked in ground on the distances. So it's really about sitting down and thinking, okay, I have X, do I put a number on each table and we call them up to collect and stuff, or is it served to that table? And the key thing inside and out is every table should be sanitized before and after everybody has used it, and really there should be nothing on it, so anything set onto the table is presented sterile.
Okay, thank you, Colin. There's a lot of questions coming through here, and you're touching on it, on the whole idea of enforcement and how to work. And I think it's important to point out the whole idea of the pavement cafe legislation and how that's sort of been adapted for this particular situation under the pandemic situation is very much something that you work with your own council area. You may find anomalies across the 11 councils, and that's something that's been quite confusing for some people, particularly if they're trading over multiple locations. So do check out your individual council's policy. It may have changed over recent weeks. I know up here in Causeway that changed just over the last week or so, when the pavement cafe guidance was re-looked at, and it's really to support businesses back to work. So that is again something that will change probably as we go over the next few weeks. But again, back to keeping in close contact with your local constabulary, working closely, communicating with them is certainly the way forward, isn't it, Colin, as we go through the opening period?
Absolutely. Look, and particularly, as Sharon has said, look, pavement cafes, they've always been variants across councils from doing it and not. So everyone will have their quirk. And I'll not go into the history of that. I could keep you another hour, you know. But look, important you get your application in quickly. But also too, if there's liquor license stuff involved, whether it's a pavement cafe, occasional license, whatever, get a letter or email of support from the council or the police, or both if necessary, in advance. Because what will happen is if you put an application in for an occasional license, the first thing the clerk of the court will have to do is write to the police and the council to ask if they have no objections. So if you present the form with that supporting material, you cut down the time and process. And it is, look, it's work with the council, work with the police, work with your EHO. People are trying to help you, and there will be anomalies and misunderstandings. It's not about trying to hang somebody out to dry because the policeman has got it wrong. It's explaining to them and reverting to your trade body or council if you need somebody else to come in and help you explain the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know certainly there's been a couple of meetings up here just with the local police looking at, and certainly the police are saying, look, we'll work with you. There's a bit of a tolerance and leniency, but the onus is on the business and the police to work together to make sure that social distancing is maintained. In the last webinar with Janice around the hotels too, it was the same, and she in her lovely way talked about people going buck daft and drinking. That will be clamped on, understandably so, but it is really having that communication going and learning as we go along, and the police will support you in that. I know there's some EHOs with us this afternoon on the webinar, and certainly communicating with them. I know a lot of the businesses were worried about do they have to go, do they have to report, what do they have to do? And there's actually a question in here. Do they need to tell the EHO? Will the EHOs be looking for record sheets for high contact areas? And are they being cleaned? What sort of enforcement and monitoring can we expect in the weeks ahead from the local EHOs?
I think any I've talked to, we've talked to a whole range of councils and Solus and all sorts. Look, this is one, folks, keep in mind this is important to do. I mean, I've worked in this industry long enough to know that, there are individuals who will try and find a sneaky way around, maybe, serve a drink late or find a wee way around a regulation. This is not about finding ways around it. It's finding practical ways to do it. We are playing here with people's lives. The virus is fatal. So if you come from it from that approach, it's not about being irresponsible. It's trying to not create a doctor's surgery that customers feel unwelcome in, but do the right thing by them and your staff. And I think it will be a case of, if you've done your risk assessments, have them on file and available. But also, it's good practice for yourselves to keep a record of how often the toilet's been checked and cleaned, because you can think it's being done, but if there's no record at the end of the day for you as an owner and a responsible person to go back and say, well, why did that not happen for 3 hours? What went wrong there? How do we fix that? So it's not about a mountain of paperwork, but it's not hard to have a wee log go and say, okay, this was done. And you know what? I'm the owner, I'm the manager. I checked those during the course of the day. That's how you keep your standards up in any process. Some people will have really nice, fancy electronic, systems to keep all those processes anyway. Others, it's as simple as a wee notebook and just somebody responsible for ensuring they're done and following up to see that was done.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of worry in some cases, and particularly from the small businesses, about investment in additional equipment and again PPE and all that sort of stuff, and that all adds to the cost of what is a difficult time when they're not even trading at full capacity. And that's something hopefully the general guidelines has been able to identify, that you do not have to introduce nobody's wearing face masks all the time unless it comes from the risk assessment. I know in some of the accommodation workshops, there's talks about fogging machines and ozone generators and all sorts of sophisticated equipment that's been has been trying to be sold to some of the businesses. So what's your advice on that, particularly for the smaller businesses?
I have never met more snake oil salesmen. My inbox is, I have people solving problems with gadgets that I didn't even know the problem existed. I reckon with some of the stuff I'm being told at the minute, not only will it save us all from COVID-19, it will grow me hair. They're just amazing. Guys, do not buy anything that isn't from a legitimate, recognized supplier in the industry. Everybody, the number of things I've got, apps that'll solve our problems, all sorts of fogs and misters. And when you read into them, like, you'd be better boiling the kettle, and I know that sounds harsh. Like, for the very big, high, top-end premises, they'll probably go away and have the team of people that can research high-level products and put them in place. For the average, ordinary business, it's good hygiene. It's risk assess it and put those practical things in: hand washing, sanitizing surfaces, ensuring social distance. Yes, look, they may be a bit expensive, and you say, okay, well, I can have 2 tables closer if I have a perspex screen between them, physical separation stuff. Some may want to turn and say, well, look, there is no legal responsibility for you to take bookings. A lot of restaurants already do, but some may want to introduce those, and there are plenty of platforms for that. Indeed, other brands are available, but Guinness have brought forward a platform which allows table bookings. They're doing it for the first 6 months free. It also allows ordering from the table. You can upload your menu. It'll actually do home deliveries, as you seen from the video. You can do click and collect on it. C&C, Trading as Tenants, and I here have them. And there are umpteen other people bringing these things out. Really look at stuff and go, do I need that, or can I manage the situation properly? It's that ordering from the table. As simple as table mats that are disposable, that are paper, that are actually the menu as well, so you have no problem sanitizing them. Other people I've got similar going to laminate the menu. That's actually harder, because by the time you get a laminated menu, okay, I give Sharon it when she arrives, the laminated menu, she looks at it. I take it back. What's its journey, and who else touches it before it's sanitized and goes back to the customer? That could be actually quite complex, because you've got to take that, then you've got to have maybe like a dirty area for those, and then you've got to have somebody who sanitizes those and moves them back to the clean area. A bit of paper that you throw away might just be as simple as
or a blackboard. I know a lot of the
yes.
They're looking at the blackboard idea, where they can be rubbed and changed and it's kept away, and even can be brought to tables by staff. Anything that reduces that necessity to spend money. And I suppose that brings us neatly to one of the last areas I want to cover today, around the whole communication issue. And you've seen the little video that Gary has prepared about just telling customers what to expect when they arrive, and there is an obligation as the procedures. You'll have your regulars that have been coming to you for years that will probably have a bit of a shock when they come back to you this time for a while, as we go through the next few months. So around the communication thing, the whole social media, it's a double-edged sword, as many of us are aware. What's your advice around communication with the customers that are coming to your restaurants or cafes?
I think communication is key. If you look at our customer base, you can probably roughly divide it into thirds. A third of them will be as keen as muck to get back out of the house, because not only have they been, they just want fresh air. It's like a lot of the guys doing media at the minute come to my house because they want out of their own just to interview me. So you will have that third. I think at the other end, you will have a huge chunk of the consumer base who won't want to come out of their house. It takes 3 weeks to develop a habit. We've had 3 months. You know, they will feel at risk and threatened, and they are the long-term piece of work. There's then the third in the middle who need reassured, need to know you're doing it right, may wait a few weeks to see how you behave. And all of your social media can talk to all of those people. You can advise the keenest muckers, if you like, what's expected of them when they arrive on Friday night. You can reassure going forward what's happening. And that's as much as, and don't be scared of media, guys. I do stacks on my phone. Just prop the phone up and talk to it. Nobody is expecting you to be the BBC. And in fact, an ordinary, genuine person chatting will be far more reassuring than a polished professional who is more about the delivery. You know, you don't have to hire a big media company to actually take your phone, walk through and point it at the bits and say, here's what they expect when you come, folks. And if you have any questions, you know what, give us a ring and we'll talk you through it. If you have any worries, as then you develop over the next week or two, take a few wee films of people, customers, with their permission, of course, doing what they're doing, having a wee drink, you know, in the beer garden, having a bite to eat, and post that as, look, here's how it's working. And again, you're reassuring people that you're doing everything possible. And it's back to that when they arrive, the best thing to do is talk them through what's expected of them. And if they do drop their guard, if they find, you don't have to grab people and throw them out the net. I'm sure if you go over and say to most people, look, sorry to bother you, but just remember we need to social distance. Yeah. Most people actually take that as, oh, look, gosh, thank you. You know, really sorry. So, you know, we are in a people business. And don't forget that, you know, we sell hospitality. So it's how we deliver the guidance and instruction. The best way to do that is by communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to be a key message as we go forward. And I can see the social media channels already starting to ping as people go back and to tell customers, we're back, you know, we're safe, we're secure, we're good to go. And we need to alert people to the good to go accreditation that's available on the Tourism Northern Ireland website. That's a little accreditation. It's a self-accreditation scheme which you can go in, look at the questions. It's all about reassuring yourselves as businesses that you've gone through the checklist, that you're covering the right procedures, and then you can use that to communicate to your customers. So it's all good to go. It's just been released in the last matter of days and weeks. And go on to the Tourism Northern Ireland website and have a look and take a look at how that can apply to your premises. It's a UK-wide standard. There's another similar one operating in the Republic of Ireland, but do take a look at that and use any method at your disposal over the next few weeks in terms of customer service training for staff. I know up here we put a number of people through risk assessment training, customer service. There will be lots that your staff can avail of just to give the staff comfort and reassurance that everybody's doing it right, and keep the social media live and your PR machine operating. And I know, Colin, you'll be doing a lot more of that. We look forward to seeing a few more times on our TV and radio schemes as we go forward. Look, that's really all we can have time for today. I know, as with all these webinars, we will have indeed answered some of your questions, but we will also have maybe raised more questions. So I want to draw your attention to some continued support for tourism businesses as we go through the weeks and months ahead. There will be a dedicated Tourism NI COVID-19 business support helpline in operation. Some of you will be familiar with this. This was the same support line that helped us through the period at the beginning of the pandemic around grant support and the financial aspects and furlough schemes and everything else. This now sort of changed focus to look at the reopening period. So the business support line will be open Monday to Friday, 10 to 5. You will hear at the end of the phone an operator. If the operator themselves can't answer your direct question and they need expert advice, they will go and seek that out. I think that's one thing that we're all very clear of as we move to reopening, that the advice has to be timely, it has to be up to date, and it has to be from an expert. It's way too important not to be. So they'll endeavour to get back to you if your inquiry is for a specific sector. There's health and safety experts, there's people in environmental health, there's insurance and legal support there available, whatever you need in your specific question. So do avail of that over the next few weeks. Many of you will also be au fait with the Tourism NI COVID-19 support web hub. It's already got all the guidance uploaded onto it, the support guidance, and that will continue to be your source, your main source of information as the guidance changes and as new criteria comes in alongside that, and that will be kept regularly updated. So do keep going back and check that in and make sure that your risk assessment is reflective of the newest guidance, and that onus really is on you as individual businesses to keep an eye on that. That will be a source where we'll push that out as soon as it possibly comes in. That's available on covid19.tourismni.com. We mentioned over the course of this webinar the sector specific webinars. A lot of people have been dipping in and out of a number of those. Hospitality, accommodation, they're all quite interlinked. We had a huge one this morning where we had over 120 tour guides in attendance, looking at specific guidance around tour guiding around the province, and that will be a key thing to keeping our customers safe and boosting customer confidence in our tourism product. So that was an interesting one and covered all sorts of aspects. We mentioned the risk assessment, the very sector specific. That was very reassuring, and a walk through the main points of building up your risk assessment and how to manage the risk assessment process in the opening periods. The sessions this afternoon, again, from Janice from the Hotel Federation and Colin from Hospitality Ulster, again, overlaying that more information from a specific accommodation and hospitality point of view. All the webinars have got lots of practice, they've lots of hints and tips, some interviews with businesses who are looking to do what you're doing, who've already done it. There's lots of best practice there as well as the all-important question and answer sessions. There is a session on Monday for those of you who are interested specifically around the big question of insurance. So that is going to be a sort of deep dive with an insurance expert of what you can expect both through the pandemic and the weeks ahead from insurance, and that again will be very interesting to a lot of you. So thank you for sticking with us on this webinar today. It's the last one on the Thursday, and with opening tomorrow, many of you will be extremely busy. And thank you very much to Colin Neill from Hospitality Ulster for giving his time. I am sure he has done so many of these over this week that he could do it in his sleep. But thank you very much, Colin, for being with us today.